Great. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Utah Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board meeting. This is the first meeting, obviously, and so as we begin, I'll be conducting, but later in the meeting, we'll be electing a new board chair and vice chair, and later meetings will be conducted and led by that chairperson who's elected. So we're very excited to start this new policy board. It's advisory, and I know lawmakers are anxious to begin getting recommendations from the board, and the agencies are looking forward to getting some recommendations from the board as well. And we've got a lot on the agenda. So I acknowledge that we do have a quorum present. We have all 9 members of the Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board there. And just to introduce myself to those joining online, my name is Rich Oborn. I'm Director for the Center for Medical Cannabis at the Utah Department of Health and Human Services. And we do have some things to go through at the very beginning that's just more housekeeping. We want to make sure that everybody understands this meeting is being recorded in its entirety, and also that there are minutes being taken, and those will be posted on the public notice website, also on our regular website. And we will have the audio recording that everybody is willing to listen to or able to listen to within 3 days of this meeting. That'll be posted. So anyone who misses this meeting can go in and listen in later on if they'd like to. And being transparent about that is important, but in compliance with the Public and Meetings Act. So I wanted to just also introduce, because this is our first meeting, the website that we have. And we're gonna, Abby, if you would just go to our website at medicalcannabis.utah.gov, and that in the future, that'll be a home base for some of the minutes that we have that related to our meetings. And we can just, while you're here, Abby, the public notice website, this is what we're presenting right now to those joining virtually and also in person. This will have all of the handouts that are related to any of the meetings that the board members receive. As a member of the public, anyone is able to go and research prior meeting handouts. And these are the documents that the board makes decisions based on, right? Along with deliberation that they have with one another. So also the links to the meeting, if you're joining virtually, you would find that on this website. And Abby, would you backtrack on that just briefly to go to the main page? But if you type in, yeah. So the way you do it is you go to state agency, you click on state agency, you go to entity, and then you find Department of Health and Human Services. Oh, there we go. And then scroll down to Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board. It takes a little bit because there's so many different public boards in the state of Utah. And then you scroll down. And so this is where you can find all that information. And then if you actually click on that, yeah, thanks, Abby. If you see at the very top, Medical Cannabis Policy Advisory Board, subscribe to public body. So this will allow board members and also anyone in the public or industry or patients to be able to be to receive an automated notification about handouts being added to this. So as soon as we share something with the board prior to a meeting, we'll also at that same time post it on this website. And that way, interested parties in the public can also be notified about additional handouts being added. But the way to trigger that is to subscribe to the public body. And so you'd be notified about any cancellation of meetings as well in an automated fashion, and agendas. And if you do have questions about information on this website, you can contact Abby Hodgson, who I'll introduce more later. But that just kind of sets some of the framework I wanted to make sure we went over as we start the meeting. And also, if members of the public, you'd like to comment during the meeting, you can, for now, get my attention if it's something that is coming up prior to when we elect a board chair. But after we elect a board chair, we get the attention of the board chair, whoever that is. And then for virtual attendees, press the chat function in Zoom, and we'll be watching for that. And you may message the meeting host to comment. We'll make sure the meeting host gets that message. But it could be that if you're here in person or if you're participating online, that although you may want to make a comment right then, it's at the board, it's at the chair's discretion as to whether that comment is taken at that point exactly in the meeting or if it's taken later. As you'll notice on the agenda, there's a public comment period at the end, and so we'll always have that as part of the agenda. And but public comment, we like to, if possible, limit to 2 minutes. So that's the expectation on that, unless it's someone that contacts us prior and requests to do a presentation that the board chair coordinates with. So that just gives you a little bit more information. If you do speak, though, we request that you wait for the chair to recognize you first, and then to state your name and any affiliation. That's helpful for as we take minutes during the meeting. And then we do have some nameplates for those in person. You'll notice that those with a yellow nameplate, those are members of the board, and those with a white plate are staff of either Department of Agriculture and Food or Department of Health and Human Services. So that helps people here see clearly who is a board member and who is not. And there's 9 members of the board. Okay. I think that is all for the welcome. And I think what we need to do now is just go to board member and agency introductions. So I'd like to just go around the room if we could, and we can start with, why don't we with you, Annalise, and then we'll just go around, and those with the department and Department of Agriculture and Food, if you introduce yourselves as well. Also, if there's any individuals who feel that it's important that they introduce themselves to the group, who plan on coming a lot to these meetings in the future, who aren't a board member but are here participating as a public member, you're welcome to raise your hand as well, and we can make sure you have a chance, just so you can introduce yourself to board members as well. So let's begin with Dr. Keenan.
Sure. So I'm Annalise Keen. I'm a psychiatrist at the Huntsman Mental Health Institute, and I've also been on the Compassionate Use Board for the past 2 years.
I'm Dillard Lindsay. I'm the Executive Director of the Utah Patients Coalition, the organization that passed the ballot initiative and started this coalition.
I'm Susan Jackson. I'm a PA and QMP at Professor Southern Wellness for the last since March of 2020.
I'm Nanette Bedingme, and I am the patient card holder representative, and I also have a child with it.
I'm Misty Smith. I'm a research assistant professor in the College of Pharmacy and a research associate professor in the School of Dentistry. And I'm the research specialist on board. I also serve on the Cannabis Research Review Board as well.
I'm Matt Page. I'm the owner operator of Riverside Farm. Been in products in every single pharmacy across the state of Utah, and we're busy growing and manufacturing products for Utah patients.
I'm Kent Anderson. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for Davis County. I am a non-card carrying member of the general public, so I'm very happy to learn so much from this group.
Do they offer cards for the general public?
Right.
Jimmy Higgs. I'm a deputy commissioner with Utah Department of Public Safety, and I am the law enforcement representative.
My name is JD Lawrence. I'm the head of legal compliance and government affairs for Olson Co. I'm a pharmacy representative.
I'm Brandon Forsyth. I'm the director of medical cannabis program and hemp programs over at the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, as well as the lab.
Michelle Hoffman, I'm the executive medical director at the Department of Health and Human Services, and Rich capably leads the Center for Medical Cannabis, of which I'm a deputy director of the section on clinical services.
And I'm Rich Olborn, director for the Center for Medical Cannabis at the Department of Health and Human Services.
I'm Trevor Eckhoff. I'm a policy analyst with the Center for Medical Cannabis and the primary staffer for this board.
And I'm Abigail Hodgson. I'm the administrative assistant for the Center for Medical Cannabis and for the board.
And then those joining in person that would like to introduce themselves, if you feel like you'll be here enough, Bijan, you're welcome to do that.
I was gonna propose Mindy. I'm Bijan Sakaki with the pharmacy.
And I'm Mindy Badeo. I work at the United Pharmacy. I'm a cannabis pharmacist. I have been for years.
Great. And anyone else from the group?
Sure. I'm Nick Thompson Law from Empathetics. We're one of the biggest medical cannabis companies in the state. We help patients from Logan all the way down to St. George.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anyone joining online that would like to introduce themselves as someone that looks like, yes, Alan Roth from Curaleaf. Thank you for joining. Anyone else that would like to introduce? Great. And Gareth from Dragonfly, welcome. I know we do have some additional staff from the Department of Agriculture and Food joining online as well. Thanks for that. And we look forward to some great discussion as we continue throughout the agenda today with those online. And again, if you do have a comment, just make sure that you indicate that in the Zoom application. We can, in chat, we can make sure you have that opportunity to make a comment. Great, okay. Trevor is now going to administer the oath of office, something that we haven't done before, and we're gonna do it now. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is just preceding our election of a chair and a vice chair. So first we're gonna swear you in. So just as a quick reminder, when I say state your name, don't say state your name, but I'm sure we all know that. So if you're able, please stand and raise your right hand. I, just state your name. Do solemnly swear. That I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Utah.
And the Constitution of the State of Utah.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
And that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Thank you.
Great, okay, so now's the time to request nominations. I'll leave this for board chair and board vice chair. And anyone is welcome to nominate a friend or to nominate someone who you think would do a good job. For both chair and vice chair, you could do all in one nomination. That's fine too. And if you want to nominate yourself, you're also able to do that. So, but it requires a board vote in a second. And we'll open it up for that.
I would like to nominate JB as the chair, because I've seen him run successful meetings before.
Sure.
Sounds fine by me.
Do we have any other nominations for chair?
Should we have a second?
We have a second, yeah. Okay, if there's no other nominations.
Great. We will take, we didn't take a vote?
Not yet.
Okay,
We have our second.
so, and, oh, there was a second already. Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Awesome, okay. And any opposed? Great. So let it be noted in the minutes that it was unanimous. And thank you. That was easy.
Fastest election ever.
Yes. Great. So, yeah, oh, vice chair, right? Okay, so nominations for vice chair.
Has to be at least as much capacity as the chair.
And again, you can nominate yourself or
I'm happy to just nominate myself.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, second,
I'll second it.
wonderful.
Misty Smith.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Great, any opposed? Okay, so we've got JD Lawrenson, represents the pharmacy group. He is the chair, and then we've got Matthew Page. He's been elected as the vice chair. For those joining online, we can make sure that that's documented and placed into the minutes. So let's move on then to some Open and Public Meetings Act training. Molly McDonald, she represents the Assistant Attorney General's office and was willing to spend a few minutes giving us some training. This is an annual training that's required by Utah law for any public body. And so Abby is going to queue up this, and we're just going to spend about 15 minutes going through some of these basics. Thanks, Molly.
I'm not quite sure where to stand. I'm gonna stand here. So Rich is exactly correct. The law requires that for every governmental body, once a year you have an OPMA training. OPMA is the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act. Abby, do you have a button to scroll?
We don't have a.
Oh, can you come forward for me?
Yes.
So the general purpose of OPMA is that the public's business should be done in public, it shouldn't be done in secret. So it has all these rules for making sure the public has access to meetings of committees, school boards, and basically everybody. The legislature gets some special consideration. So it provides requirements for conducting meetings of public officials. Actually, we can go to the next slide, because this is important. So first we have to figure out what a public body is. Office of the public body is any administrative, advisory, or executive or legislative body of the state or its political subdivisions, and it has to meet all of these requirements. It can be created by the Utah Constitution, statute, rule, ordinance, or resolution. It has to consist of 2 or more persons. It has to expend, disperse, or be supported in part by tax money, and then it has to be vested with the authority to make decisions. So just a bunch of people get together, they want to talk about how bad our taxes are. They are not a public body, they're not supported by tax dollars, and they don't have any authority to conduct public business. But once it's a committee like this, we have some authority, all as advisory, advise the legislature about what business is going on today. So we know that we're a public body. What constitutes a meeting? This is also important. OPMA defines a meeting. These are the meetings that we have to conduct in public as a meeting where there's a quorum of the public body present. And a quorum just means a simple majority with enough votes to pass whatever motions on the table. So whether the meeting is held in person or whether it's held electronically, it still could be a meeting. And the purpose of the meeting has to be for discussing or receiving comments from the public about a matter over which the board or commission has authority. So OPMA says that a meeting does not mean a chance gathering or like a social get together. So if this board went out to lunch at some point, and it was just social and we're going to discuss the business, that would be okay. I said the quorum means a simple majority of the membership of the public body unless otherwise defined in applicable law. Sometimes there'll be a statute that says this particular committee has to pass their motions by a 3/4 vote. I don't think that exists, but a 2/3 vote or something. Not for us. For us, the quorum is just the majority of the people on the committee. What isn't a quorum? So a quorum does not include a meeting of 2 elected officials by themselves and when they're not going to take any action on the substance of what the committee has authority over. Right that. So this is how we get the public involved. This is how we let them know what the government is doing. We have to provide notice of a meeting 24 hours in advance. It has to be posted on at the public body's office. And you probably saw a sign out there for posting it. It has to be posted on the Utah Public Notice website, and there, or it can be published in a newspaper of general circulation. So it's just notice to the public, hey, we're having this meeting, if you're interested, show up. The public doesn't know where to find notices of what meetings are held, so the Utah government created this public notice website. So if you want to know in any county, any commission, whatever, when they're holding a public meeting, go to the public notice website and it'll tell you. There has to be an agenda posted so that they know, so the public knows what we're talking about. It has to be, the agenda of the meeting has to be posted with the notice, and it must be reasonably specific. So we're not going to say, the agenda is going to say these are the things we're going to discuss, but it's not going to say every comment. A general description of what we're discussing, so the public knows whether they want to show up and comment. In addition, the public body that holds regular meetings that are scheduled like in advance, like we know we're going to having the third Tuesday of every month. If the committee comes up with such a schedule, they have to publish an annual calendar of when it's going to meet. But I don't think this committee is going to do that. We're not required to. So then we just decide when the meeting is going to be, and then notice in 24 hours. We do have to keep minutes and recordings of the meetings. But what we should know is the minutes are the official record of what happened in the meeting. So the recording is sort of there for the secretary to decide what was said. But the meetings are going to, the minutes are going to reflect what happened in the meeting. Okay, that's all. So the written minutes, this is in the statute, they have to include the date, time, and place of the meeting, the names of everybody who was present, who's a member of the committee or governmental body, the substance of all matters proposed, discussed, or decided, the record by individual member of who votes which way, so the public can, get mad at you if you vote the way they don't want. Any information that is a record of the proceedings of the meeting that any member requests be entered in the meetings or recordings. So if a member of the public comes and says, hey, I have this study, I would like the committee to review, then the chair would decide if you're going to accept that for review. And if it is accepted by the committee, that has to be recorded in the meeting minutes. Posting approved minutes and audio recordings to the public notice website, we just have to do that. So when the meeting's concluded, the Sacramento canvas will type up the meeting minutes. We will, at the next meeting, get them approved by the committee, make sure that they're accurate. And then once they're approved, they're going to be posted on the website. So the point is, it's not like the meetings are posted, immediately after the meeting is held. There's going to be a period of time where, and if you look at the public notice website, there are a lot of committees that say minutes pending or things like that. Electronic meetings are permitted, but before you can hold an electronic meeting, the public body has to adopt an electronic meetings policy. So that's something we should probably consider doing.
We're doing that today.
Okay, we're doing that today, great. Yep. So once we do that, it's everything is the same as if we were having an in-person meeting. We still have to post notice, we still have to keep minutes, but the public has to have a means to attend the meeting. So if in this case they can attend in person if they want to, or they can attend electronically if they want to. We just have to make sure that we're dispersing clear information. If we're not going to host the meeting in person, that the public is able to attend electronically. That means we might have to have like a host room, even if you guys were all attending electronically, we might have to have a host room in here and then person to run the meeting to allow the public in this. For people who don't have access to computers. Electronic message transmission, this is important. The OTMA does not restrict members of the public body from emailing, texting each other, as long as it's not during the time that the meeting is concluded. So if you're not in the meeting, text each other, communicate, whatever. If you're in the meeting, OTMA doesn't want you sending each other messages because they'll be, it's sort of like a private way of communicating during the meeting. Okay, ready, Abby? emergency meetings due to unforeseen circumstances that must be articulable. You can hold an emergency meeting. So if you scheduled a meeting here, our water line broke, flooded, then we could take action. Like if we had to move the meeting somewhere else, we could still take action, we could vote, but we would have to, we would still have to do everything that we're normally would do. And then the public is going to have a chance to comment about what happened during that meeting where they weren't allowed, what they weren't able to attend. Closed meetings. So all business is supposed to take place in public, but there are certain reasons why a body might be discussing information that should be kept confidential. There are very specific reasons why a public meeting that is or open can be closed. So if you want to have a closed meeting, let's say you're going to discuss the fitness of a member of the community. Are they losing their mind, off, something pretty private. You can go into a closed meeting to do that. In order to go into a closed meeting, 2/3 of the body must approve of going into the closed session. Then what happens in the closed session does need to be disclosed, but you cannot take a vote in a closed session. So if you're voting, as I said, to kick off a member of the committee, that's a terrible scenario, but that's something that we discussed in private. You would discuss the reasons in the closed meeting, but then in order to act on the motion, you would have to come back into public session or open session and take a vote. Okay, ready? So the reasons a meeting can be closed: discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. That's probably why I landed on the committee member going crazy, because that's the first statement. That's the first reason to close a meeting. So to discuss collective bargaining, if what you're discussing in the closed session, if revealing it to the public might put somebody in a better bargaining position, basically to financially take advantage of the state. We don't have to discuss our financial business in public, we can discuss that in private. So discuss pending or reasonably imminent litigation, you can do that in closed session. To discuss the purchase or exchange or lease of property, sale of property, security, to discuss security personnel. If we're talking about, hey, the security guard says that somebody might invade your meeting, we can do that in a closed meeting. To discuss investigative proceedings regarding allegations of criminal misconduct, and there are a few other exceptions, but they are very specific and limited, and I've had people approach me with a lot of questions about can we close a session for this reason or that reason, and mainly unless it falls within one of these exceptions, the answer is no. And the idea behind it is everything we're doing, the public should be able to scrutinize. So what is forbidden during a closed meeting? You may not approve an ordinance, resolution, rule, regulation, contract, or appointment. You may not interview a person to fill an elected position, and you may not take any final actions. So final votes must be taken on record. What happens if somebody violates OPMA? If the worst thing that can happen is if a body violates OPMA, they take a vote in a closed meeting, or they don't post notice 24 hours in advance. What can happen is if they take action, the person who doesn't like the action can go to court and ask the court to overturn that and say, this body didn't comply with OPMA. I want you to overturn whatever action the board took. So the bad side of that is if they actually go to court, you may be charged attorney's fees and court costs, sort of as a punishment for doing it. But what usually happens, to be frank, is if the AG's office gets a complaint from the public that the public body didn't follow OPMA, what we usually say is, and then we find out that they really didn't, we call them and say, you need to go back, reconvene the meeting, issue the public notice, do everything you were supposed to do, and take whatever action you're going to take. So basically, it sort of voids the first time you took the action. In addition to any other penalty under this chapter, a member of the public body who intentionally violates OPMA is guilty of a class B misdemeanor. I think that would be highly unusual, but could happen. So remedies and enforcement, like I said, voiding final action means the court has said, or the court either tells us we have to, or we just decide ourselves, hey, we didn't do it right the first time, we better reconvene and do it right the second time. But the court action punishment is we have to pay attorney fees and costs. So who could take action? The Attorney General's office and the county attorneys are the ones that enforce OPMA. So within the AG's office, they have a section and who receives complaints about OPMA violations, they investigate those allegations. And then they report to a committee within the AG's office whether some action should be taken. I'm not sure how local agencies or how county attorneys do it. But I know that the AG's office is mainly the body that enforces OPMA. Okay, that's all. Disruption of a meeting. OPMA does not prohibit the removal of any person from a meeting if the person willfully disrupts the meeting to the extent that orderly conduct is seriously compromised. So that's good to know. Keep people on meetings. The presiding officer of a public body shall ensure that the body receives OPMA training on an annual basis. We mentioned that before. So here are some common violations of OPMA. Closing the meeting without members of the public body first voting in an open meeting. Close the meeting. That sounds strange because I just told you you have to have a 2/3 vote to go into closed sessions. But OPMA is a pretty obscure statute, I think. So sometimes public bodies don't know they have to do that. They're just like, okay, we gotta go discuss this private thing. We'll be right back. Just don't do that. Have the vote. If everybody's okay, well, 2/3 of people are okay with it, you go to closed session. Conducting a meeting for reasons other than those allowed by OPMA, this is the big one. People want to go into closed session all the time because it can be a little controversial to discuss things in public, and there's some things that shouldn't be discussed in public to be discussed in private. If this committee ever has a question about whether they can go into closed session, I'm sure Rich will contact me and we can analyze that. Taking official or final action in a closed meeting, like I said, you can make a decision about what action to take, you can talk about it, but the vote has to be taken in the open part. Failing to properly provide notice of a public meeting. So if you fail to provide 24 hours advance notice, that's not a good meeting. Anything that happens in that meeting can't be voted. And then taking action for voting on items not listed on the agenda. So that would be bad because the public is like, I looked at the agenda, you guys said that you were going to talk about X, and then you ended up voting on Y. And if I known you were going to vote on Y, I would have showed up to talk about it. So they have to have notice of what things are going to be taken into consideration. Parting tips and helpful suggestions. This is pretty basic, 24 hours notice. Be specific with agenda items. No old business, new business. So you can't say, oh, this is old business from last time. Let's throw this on the agenda. No, it has to be on the agenda. If you close, make sure to close meetings only for statutorily allowed purposes, and make sure that you have a 2/3 vote during the open session to go into closed session. Provide minutes in a timely manner. Don't text during the meeting. That's about the part about saying you can electronically communicate when you're not in session, but when you are in session, don't do it.
And just really quick, don't text another board member during the meeting.
Correct, yes,
But if I needed some data
yes,
and I had someone at Folsom Co I needed to talk to, like JD, for the meeting, and and you're at the meeting, right?
correct,
JD can text somebody, it just can't be a board member.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes, because the idea is the public is listening to you guys discuss what you're gonna do, and if you're secretly texting each other like, Rich, go this way, or I don't, then you're not doing your business in public. So that's about that. I think that's the end. Abby, will you?
One thing I thought about adding is just that it's possible that a public comment made during the meeting could prompt a desire of the chair to discuss an issue that is not on the agenda,
Yes.
and that's okay. The chair controls the agenda.
Yes,
It's just the board can't vote on it.
exactly.
So you can go down a rabbit hole as long as it's
Yes,
the chair's call
Yes,
and then you're good,
as long as
Yeah.
you don't vote on any, vote on it, take any action, then it's totally fine.
right? And I think that happens quite a bit. You know, you try to avoid it, but sometimes things just come up that the board would want to discuss, or the agencies may want to discuss.
Yeah, and then if it turns out that the comment generates the board wanting to take some action, we should just put it on the agenda for the following meeting, and then we can take action on it.
Right. Yep.
Great, thanks, Rich.
Thank you. Well done. Okay, and just a few administrative business items. So one item related to that is establishing a regular day of the month that would work for the group to meet. And JD is chair. I'm happy to have you lead that if you'd like to. I don't mind putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
But you know, the key is we want to be accommodating to your schedule as a board. And so, yeah, let's talk about
I
it.
mean, this time works well for me. I mean, obviously I'll make any time work for this board, so it's really up to you guys if there's, you know, a hard and fast, you know, date or time you cannot make work. I like generally afternoons, you know, I think are better towards, you know, at the end of your day, it's 2 to 4 o'clock. I think is good. So we can keep it on Tuesdays from 2 to 4. I don't know if we want to do first, second, third, or fourth Tuesday of the month. But you guys tell me. I'm pretty flexible. I don't have really perfect desires to set it at a certain time. So.
I'm good with that as well, JD. The most important thing for me is just being able to calendar it out in a timely manner so I can leave it blocked. That'll be the most important thing, I think, for me. But this time works great. I agree with you on the afternoons. Tuesdays work well also. And so I think, you know, it'd be helpful, Rich, maybe to have input from staff on what you think of the cadence, the bi-monthly, you know, what works from a staffing level.
And what we had anticipated was that for now it would be monthly. And I feel like based on some of the thoughts that have come from lawmakers and from the industry, there are a lot of items that they want input on, right? And so I think a monthly is what we expected. And if this particular Tuesday of the month from 2 to 4 p.m. works for the group, then we can schedule that in. And then as needed, reschedule. And we'll talk about virtual and in-person later, but we wanted to establish availability. Does that work then? So we'll just
third Tuesday of the month from 2 to 4.
Right.
Third Tuesday, yeah.
Yeah, so the third Tuesday,
Do we put that to vote?
no, it's just administrative business. So we'll just,
And if the chair wants, I can send a calendar invite to the board members,
Absolutely.
a recurring.
Yes,
like that.
please do.
great. So that'll include you in that. Okay, so the next item is just, how does the board feel about virtual, in person? I know some board members are available to come in person every time and others might not be.
Rich, it sounds like that might not work for two
Oh.
board members.
for both of us.
Oh, okay.
Which date's back there?
Mine can do probably any other day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Thursday?
Yeah, I think Thursday would be a little bit better.
Thursday would be my next, if Tuesdays aren't possible, Thursday would be the next
Thursday
best.
would be perfect.
So
Unfortunately for me, Thursdays are your.
Oh.
Pretty much any other day will be work.
Okay.
Well, I don't mean to throw a wrench, but Mondays and Fridays are my hardest days, but I'm,
Just saying.
yeah. So
So
Wednesdays, you guys are all board, I'll need to.
I can't do Wednesdays.
Okay, Tuesday, Thursday would be good.
Yeah.
Another time on Tuesday be better?
Not really, because I just, Tuesdays, I did in vacation, so I just have to cancel all those. I can make it work.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll stick with the third Tuesday of every month, 2 to 4 p.m. And then if that can change, and we will of course let you know if that needs to change, but that's the regular cadence. Okay, Now, expectations as far as virtual and in-person or hybrid.
I would think hybrid. I mean, I've seen the other boards, work that way, but after the pandemic, I think everyone's used to Zoom. I think it works very, very well. It's one of the greatest things to ever happen in the practice of law. I never had to go to the courthouse anymore for 10-minute hearings and stuff like that. So I would prefer we allow for hybrid, especially for people that have to travel. It's not always the easiest. So I think we accommodate everybody in that way, so.
And the home base will always be this building, the multi-state office building. And so I think it would be important though to indicate to Abby, if you do plan on joining virtually, if it's like a regular cadence of that, or if it's just on one meeting, just so she knows who is joining virtually and who is joining in person.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. And so we'll talk about the bylaws later, but I think that's already actually reflected in the bylaws. Great, okay. So, and then for those accepting per diem, at the end of this meeting, we will have a payroll form. Oh, that's already with them, right? So, and then also the disclosure, conflict of interest disclosure statement form for you to fill out. We know that there is some very obvious conflicts of interest with individuals that work in the industry specifically, right? And even with the Utah Patients Coalition, there's items that are voted on that would obviously benefit your organizations, right? So that is not a problem. But what you just need to do is be clear about disclosing those conflicts so we know who that employer is or what that affiliation is. So not just employers, but any affiliations that you feel would, like that you're a board member of the Utah Cannabis Association, for example, something like that. If someone were having that membership, or obviously with that, she is a executive director for the Utah Patients Coalition. So anyway, I think that covers that. If you have any questions, we can answer those after the meeting. So great, everybody has a copy of that. And then was there anything else that we needed to do at the end to gather a document that, the I-9 form, right? And so see Abby about that. If you don't have the ID that we need to make a copy of today, that's okay. We'll get it from you soon. And we can make arrangements to make it easy for you to get that from you. But we do need to do that within 3 days. So we'll make that happen. Okay, great. So let's move on to the board bylaws. And Trevor is going to walk through that with the group as a presentation, but there is a handout that has been posted already. And if you're participating online, you can go to that handout, but there's also a copy of the presentation posted online, correct? Right? So you can see the presentation later as well. And so, yeah, that's for bylaws. We'll just cover that right now.
Wonderful. And as you can see, all the copies you have, and I believe our online copy has a draft watermark because this is a framework which you can add to, take things away from. It's entirely up to you as a board to decide what you want in your bylaws. But I put this together from common boards and commissions across Utah, including borrowing from the Cannabis Research Review Board. So I don't know if maybe all of you have gotten a chance to look at this as we just got it out yesterday, I think about midday. But what I think we can do is just briefly touch on each article, maybe talk about a couple of points that are, merit further discussion. So Article 1 is very simple, your name as established by House Bill 72. Article 2, your purpose, which I think we all know is to make recommendations to state lawmakers and agencies about potential law changes, statutes, rules, and other things that arise in the medical cannabis program. Article 3 is membership, and this is established in the law. So I think we all know this, everyone on this board. you're all members of a certain group in section 2, 3 of which are appointed by the executive director of Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and 6 of you are appointed by Tracy Gruber, who is the executive director of the Department of Health and Human Services. Article 4, duties of the board. Okay, so Article 4, and much of this I took from the House bill itself. And I'm not entirely sure how much we can add on, but again, I think this really encompasses broadly what we'll focus on as a board. So you may recommend changes to DHHS or to UDAP regarding a number of different rules. Rules are split between our 2 agencies, as you might know, but you can make recommendations on rules for those agencies to start applying. You can make recommendations to change existing rules, and you can make recommendations to the appropriate legislative committee in the Utah State Legislature. So if that had to be a statute change or a brand new law, right? Section 2 talks about how you will review any draft rule that us as an agency wants to change something under the Utah Medical Cannabis Act. So anytime our agency seeks a change in the law, or excuse me, in the rules rather, we would come to you first and get your input. You also consult with UDAP, Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, regarding the issuance of additional cultivation and pharmacy licenses. You'll consult with DHHS on cannabis patient education, and speak to both our agencies about the reasonableness of fees that are associated with the program. Fees that, you know, from cultivators and processors to qualified medical providers and patients, we can discuss all those different fees and whether or not they're at a reasonable amount. And finally, number 5 is really the catch-all, anything related to the medical cannabis program that this board wants to address. Section 3 gives you the power to establish committees and subcommittees. So what this would look like most likely is a working group. Let's say 3 of you want to tackle a specific subject on your own, in addition to any research I can provide to you as a board. If 2, 3, 4 members want to focus on something, they're more than welcome to do so. With, I believe, a vote would be necessary to establish a committee. And then that committee, as you can probably guess, cannot make any sort of changes or vote on anything. They can't close out any business, but you can discuss things, bring them back to the board for a full discussion and a vote on those items. Section 5 is about per diem. I think we've covered that a little. Section 6, which I think we talked a little bit about, is that obviously your attendance is absolutely vital to the board, barring certain circumstances where it might be impossible for you to come. I think there's an expectation that you're either here or calling in via teleconference, and that any sort of repeated unexcused absences without letting the chair know or Abby know or anyone really here on staff know that you aren't showing up repeatedly, that may be grounds for termination, which would be done by the executive director of the agency that appointed you. Section 7 talks about you may resign from the board by notifying the chair in writing. Section 8, this is a bit of a longer section. Oh, thank you, Abby. About different ways that you may be terminated from the board, either by resignation or violating the bylaws, not filling out that disclosure statement form, which we'll provide to you just after the meeting, potentially losing the status of your qualification for the position, right? So for instance, for Susan, she's a QMP. If she was no longer a QMP, that might be grounds for dismissal if you didn't hold that title anymore. Number 8 is, as you can guess, probably just being a decent person, not either having any felony convictions or any misdemeanor convictions that have to do with the medical cannabis industry or public health at large. Section 9, that's mostly housekeeping about how you will be sent if there was grounds for termination, the board did vote to terminate your appointment, that you would be notified, and that there's a timeline for letting the appropriate executive director know, and then ultimately dismissing him. But let's hope it does not come to that. Article 5, officers. So we have established a chair and a vice chair, and the duties of the chair are to preside over all the meetings, to approve and present meeting agendas, and approve anything being on those agendas. And to observe and enforce the bylaws of this board. And then number 4 is, anything else that this board prescribes that it wants to be as a fundamental part of its makeup. The chair is supposed to enforce those rules and make sure that's going on. And then in section 3, as you can guess, the vice chair, which will be Matt Page, in the absence of JD, will be making sure all those duties are maintained. And section 4, each position, the chair and the vice chair, have a appointment of 1 year, but there are no term limits. I think we've decided if that's anything anyone would like to change, that's definitely open for discussion. Article 6, staff. So that talks about mainly Abby and I's role, as well as Brandon from UDAF and Rich with the Center for Medical Cannabis. So our job as staffers is to make sure that we're helping you build your agendas, making sure these meetings are running constructively, making sure the tech side's working, and especially on my part, making sure that anything you want to know about in the form of a presentation, a policy brief, a memorandum, anything that you want to learn about and be educated about, to have a discussion over, I will be here to help provide those materials to you. And as you all may know soon, I think our next item on the agenda is actually our very first policy item. So Article 7, meetings. The board chair will determine the agenda of each meeting, as we said. The board chair has sole authority to approve those items on and off the agenda, but also with input from the board at large. The board can decide to put something on the agenda, even if the chair does not. It would just be a simple majority vote. So if at least 5 members want to put something on the agenda, that would be acceptable. Section 2 talks about this is our home base. We may be in a different room next time, one right next door, but for all intents and purposes, this building, the multi-agency state office building, is going to be base camp. Section 3, all hybrid or fully virtual board meetings must comply with the Open and Public Meetings Act. So that's more on Abby and I to make sure that we're following the rules, as Molly was talking about, making sure agendas are posted, people have links to the Zoom meeting, and also making sure that every meeting has an ability for the public to come to. Even if you went fully teleconference, we have to provide a space for the public to be able to come to. Section 4, board members that wish to attend a meeting virtually must receive approval from the board chair. So that would probably just be, I assume, with at least a 24-hour notice, asking JD, can I go virtual on this meeting? Or maybe setting up a cadence for those of you that might have conflicts pretty consistently, making sure you check in with the chair and get approval on that.
Trevor, what's the second sentence trying to say?
Second sentence in section 4.
Yeah.
The board chair may remove the voting capability of a board member who attends virtually without consulting the board chair prior to the meeting. So this is essentially, the law allows, unless you adopt a resolution otherwise, that a member that's attending virtually may have their voting privileges removed. What that means is if someone was consistently showing up virtually because they, for example, might not be very interested in the items on the agenda, they're showing up virtually because they are a member, but maybe they're slacking a little bit on the responsibilities of being part of the board, reading memorandums, really trying to have a lot of interaction with the board. So this would be kind of the nuclear option, just in case a board member was being, a little recalcitrant and didn't want to really participate. But that is something we can remove.
No, I'm just reading it. It says like board chair can remove the voting capability of a board member who attended virtually.
Yeah.
Right.
So what
but it says without, is it saying if they don't consult with the board chair prior to the meeting?
Correct. So
So they did, like, I would say I didn't show up to the meeting, I just joined virtually. Or is it just saying?
It's saying
That's how I
she's
read
saying I may do it, and you don't.
No, I know, I'm just,
Or just say.
But you can.
or I'm
Well,
saying,
maybe had
I
to-
don't know, I'm just, it's weird how it's written for me.
Yeah, no, and that we can absolutely clarify that the way that I'm reading it, and if anyone else has input, feel free to chime in. But this is saying, if you do not give the board chair that advanced 24-hour plus notice that I'm gonna be virtual, then the board chair might think, that, you're not all that
Well,
interested
maybe,
in
yeah,
part of
you
that
can
meeting.
clarify that point. I mean, that makes sense if there's no notice. I was just reading it that I'm attending virtually and then JD just decides, you know what, Matt, you're virtually, you don't get a vote.
Yeah, no,
That's how I'm reading it. And then he doesn't have to say anything, because all he has to do is he has to tell himself.
Maybe you want to tell them if we don't, we're not going to do virtual.
Yeah, I mean, you can let me know, I mean, just so we can find this, I can tell you.
And that's,
Unless something really changes.
Yeah.
when you do that.
I don't plan
yeah,
on-
So she knows.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that may be something that we want to add there.
Let's add that.
Either notify the chair.
Yeah, that's fine, yeah, as long as the board knows,
Yes.
I think it's totally fine.
Just for
Right.
clarification.
Yeah.
And just to clarify on that as well, the law does allow you, if you want to adopt your own resolution, which could be part of the board laws, to strike that entirely. So even if you don't let JD have a 24-hour notice that you're going to be virtual, in that case, if you adopted a resolution, he couldn't remove your voting privileges. But again, I think this is more for an example of, if a board member is being particularly fussy about, either showing up or letting JD know their schedules, that would be an example where that most likely would be applicable.
Trevor, can I make a comment here?
Absolutely.
One thing that I don't know if you guys have thought of, but I've had this come up other committees, there's no such thing as proxy voting. So you can't authorize somebody to strike your vote. So if you miss a meeting, your vote is just gone. So it's important to me, the virtual, the way that this is written to me, it sort of suggests that the chair can say, well, you start out virtual, so you can't vote. That's not allowed. If you're on the committee and you're here, you're allowed to vote. But if there's repeated instances where you're gonna attend virtually, you don't notify the committee, that would be.
Yeah, you may just put in there something about repeated instances of failing to notify the chair or the board itself, just to make that clear, that's what you want to do. I can honestly tell you, whether we have it written here or not, during my tenure, it won't happen. As long as you come in whatever form you come in, I have no problem. So I think if you're gonna change it, I think you would change it to just say without, I think you would say to attend virtually on, more, I don't know, majority of the occasions, something to just say like, hey, if you attend virtually one time and you forget to then notify me or the board, it's not we come down with a hammer, it just seems absurd to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that the only change so far to the bylaws that the board has requested? I think it is, so,
If we're gonna make them now, I have one other one in section 2.
okay.
I just want to add the word fines, so it's fines and fees that we can consult and talk about.
Which article are you looking
Sorry,
at?
Article 4, section 2. Is fines to be a hot topic as well as fees.
Yeah, and the statute does say fine, fees when it comes to this topic, but we include fines in our fees.
So
That's how
that's how
HHS
you're
has done it and do that, right?
Okay. but
All
yeah,
fines
so
have
the-
fees.
But just for purposes of the bylaws, I think it's great,
Yeah.
put in fines,
Absolutely, we can add it.
so people can know.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions or input so far? Okay.
Of the items discussed, no, not support.
Okay, yes, we're actually, so I think we have section 4 clear from, which article is that? From article 7.
Yeah.
So we'll clarify that JD can't just strip your powers with no
We
intent.
make it
Um,
seem just like that.
Yeah.
So let's move on to section 5. A simple majority of the board members constitutes a quorum, which would be 5 of the 9 of you. A vote of a simple majority of the quorum at any board meeting is necessary to take action on behalf of the board. Now, we had input from Misty Smith on this item that, let's say some meetings, let's say there's only 7 people or 6 people, right? does the board believe that regardless of how many folks make up a quorum, 5 or above, should that meeting be able to actually vote, right? So for an example, let's go the maximum. If there were only 5 members, the minimum for a quorum, only 3 of those 5, the simple majority, would be able to approve items. Is that okay? Is it okay that only 3 of the 9 board members are able to conduct board business and approve items? Or should we have a more stringent threshold?
3 is a pretty low number.
I had concerns with that. That was the reason I raised it. I don't think that would be representative of all the groups we're representing if we allow 3, a positive vote or a negative vote of 3 to move a motion forward.
So one option that is a potential is, since 5 is the minimum for a quorum, 5 could be the minimum for approving an item, period, right? So if we were at 5 for the quorum, it would need to be unanimous in order to have a board approve that item.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
We can always go back and revisit that item.
Yes.
Sure. You can
And-
table it.
Yeah.
What if you take, you didn't necessarily table it, if you did the vote, but then the board could bring it up again, and they didn't want, if the 3 people that voted on it, everybody was against that, they bring it up and then vote on it again. Because sometimes, if you're just getting a quorum and you're trying to get the board's work done, sometimes it's helpful.
Sure.
Anyways,
Have you seen that in other bodies that you've been a part of, or
I don't know.
you just thought about the?
Well, I mean, the legislature does it all the time, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, they'll have, so just to try to push it, but anyway, I'm open anyway, I just, if you have a minority, just 3 vote. But if the board disagreed with that, they can usually just bring it up at the next meeting and vote on it again and resolve it, or some people are like, well, that's why I would vote anyway, I'm okay with it.
Sure.
Anyway, no, I'm good with you, that's a suggestion.
Well, if the board wanted to change it later, they could, but if we just put it in the bylaws now as 5 as the minimum.
Yeah, and we can always at your next meeting come back with a few options on this section, so you can really review them, see them in front of you, and then you can ultimately make a vote on whether to amend the bylaws with it.
But for now, it seems like 5 is that what you want for the?
Yeah,
And that's,
tentatively.
that's what it would take to vote on it anyways, right? If we
Yeah.
were present,
Correct.
it's a majority, so I think it makes good sense. But I also know there's ways to make motions to kind of take not like proxy votes or anything, but just kind of a test vote on some things too, so you could always make that kind of motion.
Sure.
And then if you get there, at least you know what some of the feelings were, so you don't go to the next meeting just waiting, to get the vote, and let's take a test vote of who's here, so.
Sure.
I think that as well, but I think that's the most fair.
Perfect. So going down to the numbers on section 5, as we covered, there's no proxy or absentee voting. Members may fully participate via teleconference so long as they give advance notice to the chair, JD, and to Abby. Any meeting may be canceled by the chair when in consultation with the Department of Health and Human Services and Department of Agriculture and Food staff. That the chair determines the meeting is not needed. So for example, if this board, which is unlikely, but if you thought there was no business for the coming month, the chair could cancel that meeting. And then finally, number 4 is, as I think Molly mentioned, we can cancel a meeting if there's an extreme circumstance like the water line breaking or an earthquake or something like that. Section 6, in the absence of a quorum, any business transacted is null and void, except for measures to obtain a quorum or to reschedule another meeting. Section 7, board members may discuss board business outside of meetings, but any private meeting attendance must never include a quorum. So Molly covered most of this in the Open and Public Meetings Act training. But for instance, if you want to talk to another board member about something, that's absolutely okay. You just can't have 5 members of the board meet and discuss business. Section 8, we covered that. All meetings are going to be held in accordance with the Open and Public Meetings Act. Number 1, notice of all meetings shall be posted. That will be Abby on the public meeting notice website. Number 2, at the discretion of the board chair, members of the public wishing to speak may be recognized. This may be an item we want to expand on a little bit. There is, as far as our understanding is, there's no requirement for you to take public comment. However, you may absolutely take public comment if you wish. So that could take the form of on each item on the agenda, allowing the public to speak for, say, 2 minutes, right? Or that could be at the discretion of the chair. If a member of the public wants to comment on an item, the chair may recognize them to speak. Or you can have a public comment section at the very end, like an open forum where everyone gets to talk at the very end for 2 minutes. So those are all options. What I have here, as you can see, is JD as chair would be able to recognize people when necessary, when he thinks they have input, they want to speak. He has the authority to recognize folks, but there's no guarantee necessarily that every member of the public can speak on every single agenda item. So is there any thoughts on that?
And I can say for sure we'll take public comment, at least as far as I'm concerned. Otherwise, I wonder some of what we're doing. And we can do it on a per agenda item. I mean, I'm not, maybe not every agenda item, right? Like approving minutes and stuff, I don't think we can do that. But when we get to anything that we're gonna vote on, I think it's important to have public comment, follow board discussion. And look, we'll try to give everyone their just due, you know what I mean? I'm hopeful people will wanna, comment. Some of these meetings I've been in before, Rich, as you know, some are pretty robust debate. Some, things go by, pretty quickly. So I would love, at least things we will vote on, actual policy items, yes. In terms of administrative business, approving minutes, any of the stuff we're doing just as a board, the public is welcome to listen, but I think that would be, I would prefer to do it per agenda item instead of at the end, because I think sometimes it's hard for people to wait until the very end and remember what their comments are. I think it's better that they get to do it kind of in real time, because it allows us to then bring it back to the board and have additional discussion based on what the public would say. So that would be my proposal for it.
And also just to emphasize, public comment never has to be on the agenda.
Yep.
To take it at the discretion of the board chair. He could choose to recognize someone that raises their hand virtually or in person and handle it that way.
Certainly, I think we would, I would say we put it on the agenda just so people know which items they will, certainly they'll be allowed to. Yes, there will always be the ability for people to raise their hand, virtually or in the room and we'll take comment, right? So,
yeah. And then if there's ever a desire to speak for more than 2 minutes, then a member of the association or Utah Patients Coalition, representative or whoever would be able to contact board staff or board chair and request more than 2 minutes and we'll put it on the agenda.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, David, I think I'll agree with those comments. Typically, I'll see the public comment at the very beginning, so you've had the opportunity to comment on agenda items before action is taken, but I like your proposal of an opportunity to comment after board discussion. I think there could be times where there's a member of the public that could provide important information for discussion. But I think in general, and I would leave that up to the chair, but in general, having an active board discussion is the appropriate time.
Yep, I've seen it work well with the licensing board when people, the cannabis licensing board, and he's saying, does want to comment. I think it's useful to have it there. So
It's been very useful in the Cannabis Research Review Board as well to have public comment at the end.
and we could even do that as well too, right? When we finish our board items before we adjourn, if there's anyone that kind of has, as one of my law professors used to say, a burning desire, you're welcome to, we'd be welcome to recognize that as well. I mean, look, like I said, I'm not being very heavy-handed with this stuff. I want the public to have just as much input as we do, right? So.
Yeah, that being said, we may want to consider having a instructional statement either on the website or otherwise for the public, where they're asked to do basic actions like identify yourself, if there's a party or group you're representing.
I think we do, Abby.
If that's not already available, like we have one of those.
I did create a sort of guideline that we can discuss and talk about.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we have please state your name but not your affiliation, so we could add that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this could be an internal document that we share with the board in an email. If they want to add anything to it, they could, Abby. And then we can just make sure this is available for the public to read if they want to on the board website.
So in summary, when we come back with an amended version of this section, it sounds like at the discretion of the board chair for public comment is probably nice because, like you said, for approving minutes, maybe we don't necessarily want to take any public comment for that, but for any policy item on the agenda, you have absolute authority. If you want to hear every single person on Zoom in this room physically, then that's absolutely okay. And we can also add at the very end that there is sort of an open forum, a final public comment where potentially any item not on the agenda could be mentioned, something like that. Does that sound like something everybody agrees with? Okay, then we'll add that to the bylaws. Great. Okay. So that's section 8. Section 9, 10, and 11 are pretty simple. Section 9 is all decisions, recommendations must have a majority vote, as we described, which sounds like 5 during a full meeting such as this. And we can amend, as we were talking a little earlier with quorums, to have 5 as the mandatory for any meeting. Section 10, no individual member shall make a statement of policy that purports to be that of the board unless the board shall have adopted such policy. But no one shall be prohibited from stating their personal opinions. So what this means is if a member of the public or perhaps someone from the media, from a magazine, wants to talk to you about your position on the board and maybe an item's coming up and they want your opinion about it, it's important to make sure that that person or that entity understands, I'm going to tell you my opinion on this item, not that I'm speaking on behalf of the board, but this is my opinion, unless the board has already established something, right, as your position, your recommendation, then you can talk about, yes, we did as a board make that recommendation. Section 11, sorry, do we have a comment?
It got me thinking back to our Open and Public Meetings Act training. Did I remember correctly that the closed session requires a 2/3 vote?
Yes.
So what is that going to be 2/3 of those present, or is that going to be, what now would be 6 votes? So if we only had 5, we wouldn't be able to go to a closed session.
But because you can't take official action in a closed session, I think it still just is a majority or a 2/3 majority of the quorum.
That would be
Yes.
my
Can't
preference.
take any action anyways in closed session. And look, if we don't have more than about 5, and you voted in favor of it, we can't take the action anyway. So I would say that would be a little bit different. Than because we can still go into a closed session, with 2/3 vote, but we couldn't make a decision anyway, so it wouldn't necessarily matter. So
I agree.
2/3 of the quorum present, I think would be appropriate.
2/3 of the quorum to go into closed session.
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Okay.
Math is hurting.
That's why I went to law school.
Right. All right, section 11. This is a simple structure of how we thought your meetings may like to go. We can add something like this. One thought I heard of is after the call to order, if you want a general update on the medical cannabis program, just to hear for 5 minutes what's going on, see some of our reports, maybe UDAP has something to share. We're happy to come to you each meeting, just give you a brief update on, how many card holders are there, how many products are being sold, right? Things like that. Or we can keep this basic structure. We can always put that as an agenda item for meetings or establish it as something that occurs each meeting. But the structure right now is a call to order, your discussion and of agenda items, and then an adjournment. Does anyone feel like anything should be added to this?
I would mind hearing from DOH every time, having like a info question answer session, but we can also just add that to agenda.
Can.
This is easy.
Right, or if you just don't have time for it, some meeting, you just don't do it, that meeting.
My only worry about sticking in there is we have like a big, huge, agenda items, and then now we have to
Right.
give you 5 minutes.
It could always be something informal, such as, again, I think we have 24 hours to post the agenda, so maybe JD thinks, we haven't heard from staff in a couple months about the program in general. Let's stick it on the agenda for 5 minutes to talk about it. Does that sound?
Well, and
okay?
they can, all of the cardholder numbers and everything, you can look up online too.
Right, there's some value in flexibility.
Yeah.
Especially when there's so many policy items right now, I think the board wants to discuss, so
Absolutely.
we just keep it at 3. What's there, I think we're good.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on, we're on our last 3 articles, which are very short. Article 8, in any instance in which a majority is called for, the board chair shall issue a call for a voice vote or a show of hands. So that's up to you. It can be either way. Sometimes when folks are on Zoom, if it's hybrid, maybe it's a little difficult for a voice vote. But I'd be curious if anyone has any input on this. I think voting is probably going to be most likely pretty easy, except when we hop on Zoom. I don't know if we should do, hands up by the board member, or do you just want to take voice votes?
My preference would be voice votes. I've seen this done several times, even with people on Zoom calls voicing in. It's, it seemed to have worked what I've seen in the past, but
Well, we can just take individual votes too, instead of saying like all those in favor, aye. You can just always do, just like they do with the license.
roll
That's
call.
another
You
option.
just have everybody,
Yeah.
so then you know.
We
right?
can do a roll
Yeah,
call.
roll call is much easier, I think.
sometimes I've seen the chair give the discretion. It's, minutes usually go pretty quickly, voice vote. If it's gonna be something you know is controversial, you've heard a lot of debate, you ask for a roll call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I'd be comfortable with that approach.
we can add this to here, and again, add the flexibility of the chair when it's called for, we'll do a roll call. Wonderful. Article 9. So I think in everyone's packet, hopefully you've had a quick chance, if you're not familiar with them already, to understand Robert's Rules of Orders, which is, how to make motions, how to do all those kinds of things. But we do say, as informal as circumstances permit, it's okay not to be 110% familiar with every single requirement of Robert's Rules, since it can get a little esoteric and a little complicated at times. And then Article 10 is the adoption of these bylaws. So it says that you can amend them in whole or part at any board meeting, so long as we put that on the agenda in advance. And upon a simple majority vote of approving an amended version of the bylaws, they'll take effect immediately. And that is the end of our bylaws.
One option is the board can vote. Condition upon Trevor making the changes that the board communicated during this meeting. And then that's one option. Another option is the board could choose not to vote and to have it voted on at the next meeting. And between now and the next meeting, Trevor would draft up exactly how it would look. Changes weren't significant, but there were some modifications.
Yeah, and still, I think to give everyone time to just digest the rest of it, read it all. It's not a super long document, not super short either. I say we just vote on it at the next meeting after we see the changes, and please, submit any additional changes you may have.
Exactly.
You go ahead and see that in a red line, that'd be great.
Sure.
Yeah,
All right.
great. I think we should take a vote to table JD for the next meeting.
Okay, all those in favor of tabling the bylaws to the next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Right, any opposed? All right, it's unanimous.
Great.
All right.
And on this last item, we do just have 30 minutes, planning on ending at 4. But it's very important. It's the first policy item. And servings and milligram per serving labeling for orally administered and medical cannabis products. Trevor has a brief presentation. And then we do want to make sure we have some comment. We definitely don't have time for 30 minutes of comment from the board and the public. But this could be an item that we table. Does it seem reasonable, Trevor, if you take 10 minutes and then we have board comment for 10 minutes and then we have public comment for 10 minutes?
Yeah, I think we can absolutely, this presentation is no more than 5 minutes long, but as Rich said, if you're not comfortable getting to a policy item yet, we can always table it for the next meeting. But this may be a great opportunity for you to see your first item, feel out how this, this process is going to work. And this is a relatively simple item, so hopefully it'll go by within the next half hour. But if anyone objects, it can be tabled.
Okay, great.
Sounds like okay. So you should have all received, and for members of the public, there is a memorandum on this item on the public notice website, which was posted last Thursday, if I recall correctly. So hopefully the board's had time to look over that memorandum, come with some questions prepared, but I'm going to give a brief presentation on this item for the sake of the general public and to jog our memories again. So this item is called servings and milligrams per serving labeling for orally administered medical cannabis products. So the questions we'll be answering today, which are on the memorandum as well, is should servings and milligrams of certain cannabinoids per serving be required on orally administered medical cannabis products? So these are things like gummies, tinctures, capsules, anything that you would ingest and put in your mouth, right? Should we require a certain amount of servings on that label, on that product? And also, if we do have a serving, one serving, let's say is one gummy, should we require certain cannabinoids be disclosed per gummy? Number two, where should this information be required to appear? You know, and we'll touch on this in a little bit later, but should it be on the product label? Should it be on the fact panel? And number three, for liquid products, should a measuring device be included from the processor? And we'll go into all three of these in some depth. So the background is that in Utah, the law requires that all orally administered medical cannabis products provide on their fact panels the total milligram content and any amount of THC, CBD, and any known cannabinoid which would show up in lab testing that's greater than any 1% of any of the cannabinoids present. But Utah does not require that orally administered products have on the labels, on the fact panels, anywhere on that package, anything denoting a milligram per serving of any cannabinoid, nor a standard serving size. So an example of this would be a 10 capsule package, let's say. It has 10 capsules. The law says that you need to state there's 100 milligrams of THC if there was approximately 10 per piece. So 10 pieces, 10 milligrams per piece. The law says on the package it needs to say 100 milligrams, but the law does not say that it needs to state 10 milligrams per piece. So the concerns with the current law that we've been hearing is that, you know, only some, it's really up to pharmacies to decide what products they want to carry. And some processors in Utah, some brands do optionally include this information, and others do not. So it's ultimately up to the pharmacy and the patient going into the pharmacy to see if they have products that will actually tell them, this is how much is in my gummy, right? Calculations can be done for pharmacists with their patient, but as you can guess, it can get complicated if it's a ratio product, 2-to-1 THC to CBD, or if it's a liquid product and there's no milliliter dose amount on the package, it could get very confusing very quickly, especially for a patient that might go home, have their gummies, and then not see on the package how much THC or CBD is in each gummy. And then for liquid products, so like tinctures, that would be even more complicated if there was not an inclusion of a milligrams per milliliter. So this is a brief overview of some other states' laws. We don't have to speak to each one, but those 16 states in the US set their THC limit per piece as 10 milligrams. And that doesn't mean that you can't take more than that. It's just simply meant to partition the product into really easily discernible pieces so a patient knows exactly when I have one piece, I'm having this many milligrams. 12 states with a medical program require serving information directly on those products. So when you have your bag, your package, your container, you see right there what's in each piece or per milliliter. 5 states and 1 territory, Guam, require THC and CBD listed per serving. So the examples that I saw looking to other states, this is almost always 1 piece if it's an edible, if it's edible, or usually half or 1 milliliter if it's a liquid product. 2 states go further and require per serving information, not just for THC and CBD, but for any other marketed cannabinoid or a cannabinoid in which the brand, the processor is claiming is having an attendant effect So these would be your minor cannabinoids like CBN, CBG, right? Things that, you know, most people might not be very concerned with, but certain patients that might be the very particular cannabinoid that works for them. 7 states require physical demarcation, separation, or individual wrapping of edibles per serving. So that would be each gummy wrap. And 5 states require that the product includes a measuring device if applicable. So for a liquid product, that may be a dropper that you screw off the top of the product, and it has milliliter hash marks. So you know, I'm taking this many milliliters out of the product, and hopefully on the side of the product, it would say this is how many milligrams are per milliliter. So the basis for inclusion for servings and milligrams per serving is that patients can better understand what and how many cannabinoids they are taking from a multi-serving product and that's intended to be orally administered or consumed. And cannabinoids per serving can prevent overconsumption. Many people split their edibles or do a number of things with their edibles because the law does not explicitly require this per piece, which we are calling serving information. And number 3, patients and pharmacists would no longer be required to calculate milligrams per serving, which can cause confusion, especially when you get home and you might forget what your pharmacist told you. So the impact to the industry of requiring something like this would be that processors would have to redesign their labels, their fact panels, wherever they would put this on their package, they would have to redesign those. And I do believe those have to be approved, each label with any kind of redesign on it. New packaging may be necessary for some to accommodate additional information. So it says in the memo for, you know, a gummy, it would probably read X milligram per milliliter, but for some, they may have to buy a larger package to include that. And then finally, additional packaging costs may be passed on to patients depending on how much that processor has to change. And you can see on the left side of the screen, on the right, we have an example of a tincture that does contain dose information. It actually includes 3 different cannabinoids. But on the left, we have a fact panel that does not include that information. And you can also probably take note that information of dose per milliliter is quite hidden away. It might be a little difficult for a patient to hunt for that information. So here's a couple of examples, and these have been provided in an attachment to the memo, which hopefully you've seen. But on the left and the right, these are both 1-to-1 gummies, meaning they have the same amount of THC and CBD in them. You'll see on the right, this is a Zion gummy, and they include their 3 main cannabinoids per cube on that section. On the right, this is a high variety edible. And even though this is also a 1-to-1 edible, they only include THC, not CBD, not any other cannabinoid. On this slide, we have 2 examples of tinctures. You just saw the one on the left a couple slides ago containing its 3 primary cannabinoids, which you can see by the milligram content are rather significant. And on the right, we have a Bujum tincture that very boldly on the label, instead of the fact panel, is showing the patient quite clearly, this is how many milligrams of THC are in 1 milliliter. And I do believe it has a dropper as well with milliliter hash marks, so the patient can very clearly dose out how much they want to take. So the 2 camps, if you will, that we need to discuss are what cannabinoids should be required, right? THC is what most states require to be on that product because THC is known for its psychoactivity. But as we saw, 5 states in 1 territory also include CBDs, and some patients prefer a 1-to-1. Maybe they prefer a majority CBD product. And then finally, should additional cannabinoids beyond THC and CBD, the most well-known, be included as well? Should any advertised cannabinoid that is on that product be required to include per cube, per piece, per capsule, per milliliter? And then on the right, the second question is, where should this information be required to appear? For processors, they generally have 2 options. They can put it on the fact panel, which is required by law. It's a white sticker with black text. Or they can put it on their label themselves. And there's a number of processors like that Boojum tincture we saw on the previous slide that put it very publicly on that product label. And additionally, should we include it on a pharmacy's website? In the memo, it mentions that nearly 1/3 of medical cannabis orders in Utah are done online. So if there's a picture available of the product, but let's say I can't zoom in on it, I can't read that, should it be required in the product description on that pharmacy's website? So these are those questions in our longer form, which again are on the very first page of the memo. Should we require this information? What cannabinoid should be required? Where should it be required to appear? And then for liquid products, should a measurement device be required to come with the product? Something like a cup or a dropper with milliliter hash marks. And that is the end of the presentation. With that, I'm happy to take questions, let you talk amongst yourselves. We can also leave this up on the screen if that's helpful to see those questions.
And one thing to add, and great job, Trevor, I think that touched on the most important things. We want to make sure that you know that the actual language that would represent the rule change, that'll be incorporated into Department of Agriculture's rule, not Department of Health's rule. And so the final decision about the actual language would be made by Department of Agriculture and Food. And what we're presenting to the board today is some questions that can help the board make recommendations about concepts, right? So you can very generally say, we make a decision to recommend that a rule be written that supports these concepts, right? And then we say, great, the state agencies, ag will do their work to put together some language that represent that, and then we'll later present it to the board as is required in the law before they do a little filing that they would share it. So that's where we can go from here long term.
For context, this is in R6828.
Right.
Yeah, that's mentioned.
Yeah, and then there's, but I think one thing to notice though is that there's processing rule. But then that 2B is actually pharmacy rule. Because it's what is required by the pharmacy, because it's the pharmacy that would be, violating if they fail to post that on their website. And it could be two completely different companies. But they need to work together because the pharmacy needs the data from the processor. And that is all provided in the software. But it's the responsibility of the processor and the pharmacy to make sure that's transferred over so they can post it online. Okay, that's all.
So, question. Last year, I remember working on making sure that the top 4 out of 3 or 5 companies were listed and that they had to be shown to patients before the point of sale. So, that was talked about that we were just going to do, and so you guys are just writing. We've already passed that in law, correct?
Well, that's a statute and it does not come into effect until January 1st.
It actually does not apply for edibles
It doesn't apply for other.
or for
But adult
tinctures.
do.
It only applies to raw cannabis concentrates
Okay.
for terpenes. Yeah,
And then we did adulterants for the other, like.
and everything, yes, everything has.
So, and then my only other question is, so for me, I think if it's before the point of sale, before a patient purchases it, I don't really care as much if it's on, if it's required on the website, as long as it's on the phone. As long as there's some way for them to be able to look at.
Caveat there is patients who are ordering online and having it delivered would not necessarily. see
Yeah, it's not
it.
that you receive that
You should basically be able to say the same thing on the website that you would see on the package.
As long as it's for like before the point of sale, if they're looking online for just.
Yeah, if they go into the store, they're welcome to look at it, the package itself or have it shown to them. But I think allowing it, look, we already included on ours,
Yeah, you
so
did.
it's not a concern that we would have personally.
Just to speak for the industry really quick though, this is a major change for them to implement, so we need to be mindful of the impacts that it might have to industry, not make them automatically in violation of any
Right.
laws,
Right.
and also give them ample lead time to be able to make these changes.
So how long does it usually take when you guys are done with packaging, like you're implementing something like this, how long, so with the packaging?
It depends. I mean, if we're gonna put it on the fact panel, which is where I would prefer for it to go.
Right.
I know Boucher has taken their own stance with it, but packaging changes quite often. And you order a whole lot of just kind of, basic packaging, you would then apply labels and different things too. Matt, you can probably speak to this as well. I would prefer it to go on the fact panel. And for those cannabinoids that should be required, I think we should follow what state law says, and anything greater than 1%. If that's what we kind of determine as the threshold, should have to be included on a per milligram or per milliliter basis.
And speaking on processing side and everything, I mean, packaging, we're ordering 100,000 bags at a time. It's enough to get it. We've already gone through 2 major changes in packaging every year.
Yeah.
Where then we've had to throw away 30,000 bags
And I don't want that.
because we're out of compliance because I didn't have the state logo on the sticker or on the bag as a THC. Now, I could have put it on the fact panel. However, I have 16 items I'm putting on this fact panel. And I've already increased the size of the bag for the gummies. Right? I mean, I think when you get, it's hard on a processor to be very specific and say, this has to be on the fact panel, or it has to be on the product. I mean, so our brand of gummies that we produce, we've had it from the very beginning. It says each piece formulated for 10 milligrams or 20 milligrams, or if it's a blend, it's a 5 and 5, 10 and 10. It's on the front of the bag.
So would you just leave it up to the discretion of the processor to put it on the package or the fact panel?
I think if it's visible and it's there,
Regardless. of where it
regardless.
occurs. Yeah.
And I think the second point on this that came up is, as a processor, we're formulating the gummies based off the cannabinoids. So if we're saying this is it's a 112 THC, CBD, CBG, those 3 at least need to be pointed out per serving size. Now, you're gonna get minor cannabinoids below that, like you might get a little bit of CBN, right? That's just part of the full extract process that we're going through. It's not that we're throwing it in there just for fun. It just, it goes with it. I'm not omitting it. But I think if you're intending or formulating it for a certain reason, that has to be on the label, whether that's on the packaging label or it's on the fact panel. But making it easier for Utah patients to understand what am I consuming, how much am I getting? Because I get so many complaints from people saying, well, how much is in here? I said, well, just look at the front of the bag, and it says there's 20 or there's 30 or 40 milligrams of THC. And then again, it still falls under the rule within 10%, because there can be a little bit of variance within testing and within other things like that. And that's still the current statute we follow. So that's kind of the perspective on our side of where we get this. I think it's needed. The confusion is sometimes even worse than that, because then you're having people do math and, okay, well, how much does this gummy weigh? Are they pulling out a thing and weighing the gummy to verify? Because, I mean, we do legally have to put the weight per piece or the total weight. I mean, but again, you gotta divide how many gummies there were, and then you're talking about, okay, am I splitting it? I mean, is it actually homogenized well to where I'm getting, if it said it was 20 and I cut it in half, is it really a 10 and a 10? I mean, there's a lot of things that for patients, they shouldn't be having to do that. If they need a 10, they should buy a 10, but they should be able to get what they expect.
And to me, at least a broader discussion about packaging and labeling will at some point, the ASTM standards, and what those are. I encourage departments to look at those. It just makes it a lot easier. But to me, for patients, they want to know a couple of things, right? They want to know potency, and they want to know how much is in the entire thing, right? You know what I mean? So I know we do milligrams per gram, all these different things. I think this is a way to simplify it. But to Matt's point, I think where it goes is not necessarily as important as the information, being there. And I think if you do advertise, ratio products, you probably should list all of those cannabinoids. And then otherwise anything, I don't know if we have to go to greater than 1%, but I think the more you deviate from what we're already doing, and you do different things over here, and different things over here, those fact panels become absolutely impossible to understand, right? Sometimes I look at them and I'm like, just can you tell me how much is in the single serving? Can you tell me how potent it is? Because that's really what I want to know when I mean as a patient.
Usually, I'm not sure I totally understand the difference between the product label and the fact panel. It sounds like there are bigger issues,
So,
but for this discussion.
Product label, think just the package itself, right? But fact panel, think actually.
This is an example.
Package, fact panel.
Okay, and so that's coming from, like, that's a bulk package coming from the processor?
Yes, the one on the right, that's packaging or labeling, right? And then the one on the left is a fact panel that's created after testing and everything and has been.
I think it's important to know that the fact panel comes from the actual test and the
Yes.
packaging is just something that's close to the.
And timeline wise, the packaging for the product is ordered in the tens of thousands and made months in advance or years in advance, I don't know what you guys do. Whereas the fact panel is produced right when you're shipping out the
That's the
product.
most accurate.
Yeah.
Okay. So with a typical patient buying something, would they see the fact panel?
Yes,
They would.
it's on the product itself.
Yeah, it comes
So
from the
they're buying that
process.
size.
Yeah.
Okay, patients correctly, they should rely on that to mirror their next product.
Okay, thank you.
My only concern is with the paper products, if you're using an oil, that is going to disappear really quickly for someone trying to, the bottle, once you use it over and over again, you get a lot of spillage with tissue oils. That it could make those go away.
Those tend
Just
to
the
be
patient
in a
concern.
box
What was that?
and then the
box?
packaging, the label will be in the box.
Maybe just a question, is there allergies to specific cannabinoids? If you're, can you be allergic to one cannabinoid and not allergic to another one?
That's right.
I'm thinking about that less than 1%, if that even, if, you know, that was what kind of came to my mind, if there's an allergy related to it.
There are people who are sensitive to certain cannabinoids. You really don't find out until you try it. And you can get really sick. But
Or just doing
yeah, it depends how your body responds to it. But really, the only allergies that we have to list on a fact panel are ones that are, I mean, coconut oil. It's very rare, common, but that's
Yeah.
very common. I mean, but if you're making, I mean, things with dairy in it, I mean, any common allergies, the allergists have to list it.
As far as the, like the little squeeze top, I love those, the droppers are good. I don't know that we need cups, I just worry about cost. I know that everything ends up with patients, I feel like everybody has a teaspoon in their house. You use like just like a regular measuring, and I guess,
But not everybody has to go.
they don't have milliliters. So then do you say like syringes?
I personally, we have to purchase the syringes if we have, we have to give them to our patients. I would say some tinctures, as most of them do have the increments,
Yes.
but sometimes the processor will have trouble sourcing and then we get a batch out in the increments and then patient home. You're like, how do I fix your out there? So then I have to come back.
Yeah, those droppers are pretty inaccurate as well as measuring. Yeah.
Trevor, is the liquid products talking more like the liquid suspension drinks, like there's some squeeze ones and that are out on the market?
I think the most common, and I can double check on this, but I think the most common sublingual suspension, or excuse me, liquid suspension product is tinctures. But what we're mainly talking about, and we saw a lot of examples in sort of going to pharmacies and looking at these products that many of them already require this. This is a big point to me, is that many brands are already including a dropper with milliliter hash marks and saying this is how many per half milliliter per milliliter. So anything that's coming in a liquid form, and I think Brandy might be able to speak to this, but I think virtually all processors are weighing in milliliters. They're liquid products. So yeah. So anything that's coming per milliliter is what we're targeting. And to address Des's concern of like added cost to processors, something like a cup, I think that ultimately may be up to the processor to decide, maybe if they want to take a more inexpensive route, right? For a tincture, they already buy the droppers. How much more is it to buy a dropper with milliliter hash marks? Probably not that much. But ultimately, that's why we said, and it says it at the end of the memo as well, you could leave the measuring device up to the processor, so long as it's included with the package. So something like the Boojum example on the right that's coming in that bag, maybe there is a small plastic cup that comes in that bag. Or the cup itself could be the top. You take off and it has milliliters in there, right? So ultimately, an option would be leave it up to the processors to decide what works for them and their product.
And the maximum is 30 milliliter,
Yeah,
right? Anyway, so it can't be bigger than a tincture size
On a
anyway.
big cup, yeah.
Yeah,
And I can just be like, industry wise, I don't think there's anyone buying tincture bottles that don't have a dropper or don't have marks anymore. It's just,
There is.
even if they are, then it's.
They are.
they-
And like I said, it's spotty. We definitely
Yeah.
have to provide them for patients because.
Yeah, that should fall on the processor, not on the pharmacy.
But,
The processor should be providing.
oh, yeah,
yeah,
And
like the pharmacy cannot open.
Yeah,
neither-
yeah, you can't do that,
And
yeah.
neither can the state, so it'd be a hard thing to
Yeah.
police. It would just be a patient reporting this doesn't have
Yeah.
a mark
Which
and
have the
a
lines.
processor.
Right.
You might include it as part of the packaging approval, right, that we all have to go through anyways, you know what I mean? And you have to provide beforehand, you know,
Does
what you're
everyone
gonna
know?
use, you know, the drop you're gonna use, so it's not a question of, hey, can I see through the bottle to see if it's got the,
Yeah.
you know, marks or anything on it. I know also too, in other places where they have, you know, where they have products that are sold without that with it, they may provide something. I mean, I've seen the syringes here, but I've also seen super simple, you know, what almost looks like iPad type of thing. Yeah, exactly, those two. But I really do think that should fall on the processor, and they should have to have some
And
form
most
of
of them do
approved
it.
as part of the
Most them do it.
packaging, right?
It's just sometimes.
Yeah.
I say without.
And I think if we required it as part of the packaging approval, and then if they're found to not have it, I think that should be more on the, you know.
So you want to have to submit that to the department though, because if you change suppliers and it's just a slightly different form of like demarcation of the dropper.
I mean, look, I mean, you have one or two options, right, or one or two choices here. You either require pharmacies to do it, you know, regardless of what a processor does, they have to supply it. That's a cost to pharmacies, and it might be a redundant cost, right? You may not even need to supply it. Or you put the onus on the processors, and to Mindy's point, if you're having instances where you're seeing, oh, once they open the bottle, the patient gets home, they open it, they don't have that on there. Well, then, okay, I guess we should provide it as a pharmacy. Shouldn't the onus be on the producer, the
Yeah.
processor?
And
actually
often the
producing
I'm
it?
just saying, do you want that as part of approval by the department or just a requirement?
You could maybe just make it a requirement, and then if they don't, I think that might be easier.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's no pre-approval.
Yeah, no pre-approval for it, yeah. It's just a requirement that they have. And then obviously, if you start to see it, maybe to your point, you know, obviously for me as the pharmacy representative, I would welcome
I can say come replace this back.
all of that feedback. Yeah, no, I think that's part of, just like if you were to get any product that doesn't, you know, doesn't meet the standards, right? It should be sent back to the, you know, to the processor to have them fix it. So, and to Matt's point, I haven't seen anybody that at least doesn't have some form of a doser with the tincture at this point. May not have do you see that? Do you see some that don't even have
Yeah.
droppers?
I've been more during a lot of supply issues.
Gotcha.
With COVID. And
Yeah.
there's definitely 100%, that's why we had to purchase the dosing.
And there were more liquid suspension products too. I mean, now you're essentially tinctures and you've got the squeeze, but the squeeze products to, you know, for pure leaf. Those have a way to dose, right? When you squeeze them and it fills up the little cup at the top, so that helps already dose. But everything else, I mean, True North, I think, is the only one that has, you know, those, you know, essentially liquid suspension that doesn't seem to have that, but
And that would be per whole entire.
Yeah, and that's
So you dose
Yes.
that, yeah, because that would be a one serving per.
yes, exactly. Yep, or one dosing per shot, yep. Yes, it does. It's pre-dose for you.
I think from a research standpoint, it's very important to have any advertised cannabinoids be included in the requirement. Because I know one of the things that's restricted some of the decisions we've been able to make at the research review board is that there hasn't been a complete understanding of what has been taken by patients in some of the studies and for even clinical trials that are coming in. And these are constantly flooding, but the information is so limited that I think the more information available, the more valuable it is.
I think where you run into the issue with that, which I'm totally behind with that, is that the legislature has set a cutoff for when cannabinoids need to be included on the label or not. If we follow that, and I mean to say anything greater than 1% would need to fall under this as well. To me, it keeps it cleaner, instead of saying like, we want everything.
Understood.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But yes, once you get under 1%, I
Yeah.
think there was some good.
I think there was to say any advertising that, like, and so
Yeah.
the department does feel very strongly that we want to have that defined as an advertising
Yes.
standpoint if it appears on your product base.
Even less than 1%. I mean, it's probably unlikely if you're advertising cannabinoid that it's less than 1%.
But anything that is advertised on that
Yes.
base, it should be in milligrams per
Yes.
serving.
I agree with that too. I think advertise is the way to go because
Yeah.
it's like the 1%, you're gonna have it 0.005 milligrams, and it's just going to confuse patients. So I think
Yes.
this is significant cannabinoids in the product that are
Yeah.
advertised. That makes it easier for patients.
JD, just really quick, there was a public comment from Alan Roth that he posted in the chat. And you could either recognize Alan if he wishes to speak, or I could read his comment.
Go ahead and read it, and then if
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
take further comment on it.
Do you want to unmute him then? And see, Alan, are you still there online? We just saw your comment and you're recognized by the chair to be brief in your comment. Just a moment as we work that out.
You should be able to speak.
Okay, Alan, are you still there? It won't let him.
There you
Yes, thank you.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Very happy to see this board take place, and it's been fascinating to listen to. Just one thought, while not offering any comments on where the information should come in and recognizing that Curaleaf will be happy to follow whatever is ultimately decided by regulators, respect the need to protect Utah patients, but have to wonder if the calculations should not necessarily be handled by MJ Freeway through the COA analysis, so that the calculations are not handled by manual calculation, which can be subject to error, especially as you're not dealing with whole numbers, because let's face it, target potencies are not actual potencies. They are subject to plus or minus 10% fluctuation. And if manual calculations can be incorrect, they could potentially expose licensees to further exposure and risk, when MJ Freeway handling it could make all the data available from wholesale to processing to pharmacies. Everybody has a point of truth to refer to. Thank you.
And for me, that's why I would suggest the fact panel is the better place to place this, right? I understand you may put on your bags formulated for, right? You know what I mean? But that's not always accurate. It's 10% plus or minus. I would argue it should, that's why I think you should go on the fact panel, so you don't have these instances where you buy bags and you say, hey, formulated for this, and then, oh, no, it's not. So now that bag's no longer good. You know what I mean? I think the fact panel is a more appropriate place for this type of information use, in my opinion, to avoid that issue. And of course, then you rely on the COA and it's exact. It's not, here's what we're striving for. Right now, look, we know it's a 10% variance, but I'm not sure all patients are going to know that. And for some that are sensitive, even that little bit, especially if it's more, could be significant, right, for them. So I'd rather see, just to Alan's point, I would rather see it go on the fact panel and be measured off of the COA. And that's why, is just because you do have, look, we put formulated on ours. I know a number of people put formulated on theirs, but no one ever reaches a round number for the most part, right? I mean, we're some 10.76, 10.49, right? You know, or even down below 9 point something, right? I think that should go on the, I mean, that's why it should go on the fact panel, just personally. But I mean, I guess if Matt's willing to take the risk and their formulation, you know, is on point, I guess that's, you know, I guess you can take that risk, right?
We've made almost 1 million gummies. We've been off once. And that was because we had a cook left off one batch.
But when you put like formulated for 10 milligrams,
So
you're
we
getting
went
directly on 10.
hand, what?
You're
We're
getting
like a
directly on
10.1,
10.
9.9.
So there's still some
10.
variance.
So like the last 4 we had were exactly on. I mean,
But we're not saying that they're not allowed to put it on the product.
No.
And a minimum would have to be on the back.
yes, minimum, yeah. I think that as a processor, I think it's the more you're requiring on fact panels, that means I gotta buy bigger fact panels. And we're already putting on, that's a manual process right there, is hand labeling every single one you deliver. And I don't
So it
think,
just has to appear somewhere on the package, and as long as it's within 10% plus or minus.
well, I think, I mean, we already have to, like, I'm looking at one of our labels, it's the same as the ones we just looked at. We have to have the potency on there. You have to list the total THC by bag, right? I mean, that's the requirement in there. I mean, if it's within the 10%,
And you're saying formulated for too, and that also
Yes.
denotes that, there may be some.
Yeah, it's a formulation. It's not, you're never gonna get a precise science based on, and it's also based on test results. I'm sure Brandon can speak to this. You run a test multiple times, you are gonna get variance. And so if you're expecting to have it be that way, that's why within any sort of formulation, you're allowed within a 10% variance.
So as long as it appears somewhere package label, fact
Package label,
somehow,
and
and as long as that number is within 10% of what the actual COA result is, you should be okay.
The only advantage, I was thinking through this a little bit, to having it all be on the fact panel is that the patients will know every time where to see it, right? Without fail, they know the law requires it to be there. And regulators, as you go in, your team will know exactly where to look for it every time.
Because I can tell you that's one of the frustrations we have in getting packaging and labeling approved is what has to be on the fact panel versus what can be on the package or label, right? And it's this game of, and then it's like, what if I put it on the fact panel? There's the block of information I have to have, right? And then there's the block of information I can include. Maybe I have to put a warning on the fact panel because I get to be able to order my packaging and labeling. So look, I would prefer fact panel just because I think it's one place they can always look to it. But to Matt's point, I think as long as it appears somewhere on the package or label, that also might be sufficient. But really, to me, it's what's going to be best for patients, but it's not going to create outsized additional resources to have to be spent by us as producers, because ultimately those get passed, those get passed to the patients. So.
One other thing is, if it did say fact panel, that doesn't mean that they couldn't put it on the label as well to advertise it.
Yeah.
As a safety precaution, you want to emphasize it, you emphasize it. And that's actually a great idea. But you could choose not to, and you wouldn't be violating the law. You just make sure it's on the back panel at a minimum.
And they consider a potential direction for use. So although we may require it on the fact panel, you can say, hey, it's also going to be included as a direction for use on the package itself.
Sure.
We do that as well, right? We see our companies do that as well. So
one of the concerns about the fact panel is just having space for it if it's not done already, but we know a lot of doing it already. And most that do it already, they put it on the back panel.
That's why the department kind of leaned towards the idea of any advertising cannabinoid, not all that are above 1%. That way, if you have like a 1-to-1 CBD, CBG, then you just have those two on there, and it doesn't overwhelm the label.
Yeah. And we just had a message, just really quick. Kaylee Rigby says, I had droppers without markings, but the processors have always brought in replacements with markings. And that I can give to the patient, I would request that it has to be black print, somewhat difficult to read, especially when the print is in white.
And to bring that up, one of the Zion examples, actually it wasn't Zion, it was the High Variety. They emboldened the THC or cannabinoids per cube, right? So that's an option too, if you include it at a minimum or exclusively on the back panel, emboldening it so it doesn't get lost in that block of text from everything that's coming from the COA.
So we're at 4 o'clock now, or a little after 4.
I have one other item I wanted to bring up very quickly. Our policy analyst brought it up on the bylaws. I guess we would like to request that we be able to make non-substantive changes to the rules without first bringing it to the board. For example, in one of the rules, tetrahydrocannabinol was spelled incorrectly with hydra instead of hydro. And so we just want to be able to make those, we're already able to make those rule changes without like going through the full rule review process. We just want to make sure we're able to make those kind of changes without bringing it to you. We wouldn't be allowed to make any kind of change like that anyway to rule if it had any kind of substantive change. The rules committee will bounce it back to us if we try to make any of those. So I don't think you need to worry about us trying to sneak anything through that way. It would just be non-substantive things.
I would think at least notice to us, even if you don't bring it in front of us to have us discuss it and provide advice, at least notice to us of those changes.
We can put in a sentence about that in bylaw.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I don't know if that should just be grammatical changes, because that could be
I
something.
think we want to be consistent with what the rules committee or
It's substantive or non-substantive,
That's the thing.
and I can explain what that is later to you.
Yeah, it's just whatever the definition that they use for that.
Yeah.
Let's just do that to define what's substantive versus non-substantive.
Yeah,
Can add that.
I can help with that, sure.
Great.
Okay.
Close out the.
Yeah, so the JD and board members, you can do what you like with this specific item. Options are table or vote or, yeah, you can, I guess, vote on either of those.
And just to explain, not to interrupt you, Rich,
Yeah.
but at the end of the memo, I mentioned, some of our options, or your options rather. Where did I put my last page? I saw that here. Here it is. So as Rich said, you can vote to table it or to take action at this time. So what action may look like is recommending that Department of Agriculture and Food draft a proposed rule change to include some or all of the information presented to you in those questions, and we can pull those back up. It might be helpful. But that's what the action could look like. If you'd like to see some options at your next meeting, we can come back with proposed rule changes on, just 1 and 2 or 3 as well, since they all cover different sections.
And before we continue back, is there any additional public comment? Whether online or?
we
Yeah.
have posted something. Like, yeah.
Yeah, we just have some photos that were, oh yeah, we did have some.
Yeah,
So I'll go with these, and then JD, we can recognize one of the public members back here after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have narrative from Dragonfly. FDA generally intends to consider 2 drugs to have a similar dosage strength if the dosage strength of the compounded drug is within 10% of the dosage strength of the commercially available drug product. In the future, FDA will take over federal regulation of cannabis, so it makes sense to not reinvent standards. And then Kaylee comments, sorry for this whole response and discussion. I wanted to get pictures to show my concern. She's posted some photos of the dropper that was of concern. And then Kristen Rigby, that block, I realized that I only, okay, great. So she's, whenever I've said it's Kaylee, it's actually Kristen Rigby, who's the pharmacist at block.
So point of information, the concern with the dropper is that she couldn't see the demarcation.
Yeah, sometimes it's white. Okay. And so she
Would
heard.
that include etch though? I think some people have issue with having a liquid that has.
Whatever the
onto a
demarcation.
dropper.
we can blow that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, she says some are difficult to read, especially when the print is in white.
Yeah.
Show her pictures.
Right.
Do you want to go? Yeah,
Look
that's
at that.
great. Can we open that up? Oh, yeah, that's,
I agree that they're hard to read, but I actually prefer things that are etched rather than printed on
I will
myself.
say sometimes the ink will also rub off, and so it will be, it'll be at first, and then it rubs off.
That's why I feel that.
but that was just.
So do we want to take any action on anything? Do we want to table it for the next meeting? All yours.
I think we can all agree that we do want categories listed.
Yes.
And we agree on the advertised.
Yeah, and we agree that we want it where.
At the very least on the back panel, but then also appear on the packaging
Yes, I
label
think
itself.
I think we have that in common. What else do we all kind of agree on?
What do we think about the pharmacy website?
I think if some people are purchasing there, I think they, like we discussed last session, it was before the point of sale. So if they're ordering online, it has to be there.
Okay,
What do
and
you disagree?
no, I mean, we already have this stuff on our website, or in our app. I'm not concerned at all, right? This is the information we want patients to know, so I have zero problem with it. It's just gonna be more, to Matt's point, where on the packaging and stuff, is, that's the consequence to me for industry. Making sure it's on our website where we already have that information available. We use publicities as well, right, and percentages. We use the common vernacular for patients would be
use, and what consumers will use. So it's not, I don't think it'd be a problem for us.
And I will
pharmacies.
comment, some
Yeah, of
pharmacies
course.
do not include on the website.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
They
certainly.
What?
They haven't had.
No, that's only for
Definitely
terpenes, though,
differences
right?
and
Oh, yeah.
Differences in what is included in the website and.
Of course. Yeah, and it's something I'd be happy to get more feedback from the pharmacies. I've met with 7 of the pharmacies already in person. And you haven't been one of them, but I would like to meet with you at some point, right, to get the feedback on these things. So yeah, I'm sure not all pharmacies will do it, but I think it'd be somewhat easier for a pharmacy to do that than to, necessarily the packaging, right? I think that's a little bit different, but look, I think as long as the patient can see it beforehand, or at least once they get it in their hand, it's important. But yes, not all pharmacies will have it, but look, this is also going to probably require packaging changes for people as well. So there is going to be some level of pain associated with these kinds of changes, but I'm open if we want to table that part of it for now, and so I can get better feedback from the pharmacies individually, happy to do that. You guys tell me. I think we've agreed on the majority of the things.
Maybe then we should we could ask for language then, and look over for next
Sure.
time, and we can look at pharmacy.
Yeah.
I would like to say, I don't personally think that there's any reason to like individually draft dummies, like,
No.
or like. I think that's like a hard no, but I do think that obviously, I mean, I know you guys want to hand wrap.
Where do you hand feel?
Hand maybe.
I would hope the patients don't want that, because it's not good for the environment, it's hard for people.
Yeah, right.
It's just bad.
So the last one is the measuring device. Should we just have them propose language on that as well and then just see it? Okay. So I think at this point, I think the official action would be that we would direct the Department of Agriculture and Food to provide proposed language. Do we need to make motion, second, all that?
You
kind
could
of stuff?
table the issue to be voted on at a future meeting, knowing that you requested that we take on some research and that some board members will do their own.
So we
section.
motion to table the issue until we see the language.
Right.
Okay.
Could you possibly get the language before and like.
Oh, yeah.
Google that, look over it, and then have, so we're all ready to go next time.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be a motion to table, it would be a motion to, we recommend that you have draft the language
But you could do it either way.
for the next meeting, so we put it on the next meeting.
We'll draft the language.
Yeah, I guess it's semantics.
Okay,
Right.
I'll make a motion to draft the UPAF draft language to bring back for us to review.
Great.
Okay.
I second that motion.
Second.
So, yep, so we have a second. All in favor of recommending that UDAF draft proposed language in line with the decisions that have been made here today, and that we review it prior to the next meeting and take action if appropriate. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
One other item, JD, before we break really quick is, we were thinking it might be good to do a strategy session for our next meeting, to include that on the agenda, such that we would prioritize you would prioritize as a board. Because there's a lot of different items that have been shared by the Utah Cannabis Association, by the Utah Patients Coalition, by agencies, and the board would just need to prioritize what those are. And I think we include that in the next agenda.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you're gonna have the medical cannabis governance working group meet again in August, right? The interim will be here before we know it in October or November. There's a number of issues I've already heard them say they want to have come in front of the board. So I think we should include strategy as a significant portion of the next meeting, to be quite honest with you, kind of directing where we're gonna go, things we need to look at, talking about priority, because certain issues are bigger than others, right? And certain of them might deserve our attention, sooner than later, because I know both lawmakers and regulators are chomping at the bit to put things in front of us. One thing I would say though, is I would encourage all of us to bring issues forward that matter to us, not just issues that matter to regulators and lawmakers, right? We are a policy advisory board, but we also are allowed to advise, in my opinion, on our own policy agendas as well, right? As a group, so don't feel like the only things that we can do necessarily are just work on, hey, regulators brought this rule, lawmakers want an opinion on this. Feel free to bring your own policy initiatives as far as I'm concerned as well.
So when you communicate those ideas, I would communicate that to one thing I didn't provide at the beginning, but it's really important, is we do have what we're calling the MCPAB email address, mcpab@utah.gov. That is, Trevor checks that and Abby checks it. So send any items there, but you can also copy JD as chair.
And then are we allowed to communicate with each other without sending an email to the, I mean, look, I mean, obviously.
As long as it's not a quorum,
Of course, okay.
Right. about items that will be voted on
But
later
if
on.
we're all included on the email, together, we would include the MCPAB email as well.
Sure.
Okay.
And to expand on that, I've already started drafting something for the strategy session, including some of those items the working group has said they want to hear from us. So if you're okay with it as chair, if anyone has items, either in general that they have heard of or specific things from the constituencies or groups you represent, you can always email those items and ideas to me, and I'll compile them into something that we can really dig into at the next meeting. If that sounds.
Yeah, I think just
like
making sure that
something
we're all aware of what will come up at the next meeting, right? Make sure you're
Yeah.
creating, and that's why I think having that MCPAB email will be, important to
Yeah.
CC on as well, because that'll be a nice central hub for where those things can go, but they can also send it to you
Exactly.
individually, to myself, with the group. Let's just make sure when we come to the meetings, we're all on the same page, because I would hate for someone to come and feel like, man, I didn't have a chance to think about this before, and then you're kind of put on the spot to try to figure it out while we're all jabbering, and I just think that's just ineffective.
Yeah, we'll have a memo with all of these items that you bring forward, ready to go.
And also, we understand there's board members that know a lot more about certain subjects than others. And so if there's education that you feel like you'd like to receive from another board member, for example, or from the industry, you're welcome to reach out to the board chair or to another board member. Matt Page is the cultivator, and then JD would be the pharmacy, and also represents processors as well. So that would be something I think you could reach out, and we can also help connect you with some of that education if that's helpful. So I think with that, does that cover everything
On the agenda.
Now Yeah, for the most popular motion of the day.
Great.
Motion to adjourn, it's not debatable, all in favor?
Hi.
All right, any opposed? All right, it's unanimous. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Do we need to sign all these papers?
Yes, so